Movie review. Share and enjoy. This is Movie Uncover. I am James. Today is a story about love and companionship, where a wife waits for her husband, from young to old, but eventually forgets what he looks like. In the 1970s China, Mr. Lu, an intellectual, was persecuted and sent to a farm in the northwest of China for labor reform. His daughter, Dan Dan, is good at dancing and became a dancer. She rehearsed tirelessly in order to be chosen as the main actress dancer for a dance show. Her father left her since childhood. She has little affection for Mr. Lu. Mr. Lu, who had not returned for many years, was homesick and escaped on the way. Returned to a farm demolition. Captain Lee of the Labor Propaganda Team office told the mother and daughter about Mr. Lu's escape. After the mother and daughter were informed, they each had different feelings. The wife was full of worry, and Dan Dan, in order to be the main dancer, immediately stated that she has nothing to do with his father. But even so, Dan Dan still did not become the female lead. In order to track down Mr. Lu, the director of the farm also came to the home to question the mother and daughter. Due to her father's escape, the leaders of the dance school replaced Dan Dan's lead role. The leader in charge said, "How can the daughter of a reformed prisoner of labor be the leading actress?" That night, it rained heavily, but she sat alone on the street and cried. And it was also this rainy night that Mr. Lu came home, eager to meet with his wife. Won Yu. But the door of the house was not opened for him. Facing her husband who has been waiting outside the door for years, the wife struggles with the fact that opening this door is equivalent to closing the door to her daughter, and the two people separated by one door failed to meet. Because of the sudden return home of Dan Dan, Dan Dan collided with her father, whom she had not seen for years. The daughter, however, looked like a stranger. Looking at his daughter, who grew up without her father, Mr. Lu's tears flowed unconsciously. He asked his daughter to pass a message at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning to meet at train station flyover, and he turned quickly downstairs. But also uneasy, Mr. Lu came back to leave a small note. In exchange for the lead role, Dan Dan tells the news to the farm instructor who is monitoring the home neighborhood. It turned out that she was trading Mr. Lu for her lead role. And as soon as the information was provided, the instructor explained the situation to the head of the dance school for Dan Dan. The next morning, Mr. Lu is hiding under the flyover. He gathered some stagnant water to wash his face and cleaned up a little. The clock had gone past 8 o'clock, but the person he was waiting for did not appear. Looking at the train that was about to depart, he couldn't help but shout his wife's name at the train station. At that moment, the wife reached the overpass. She saw Mr. Lu who was shouting his name, and she also saw the instructors who running towards the sound. Perhaps Mr. Lu knew he could not go away. He just wanted to see his wife. The two ran to the overpass, regardless of everything. But at that moment, the two were caught by the instructors at both ends of the flyover. Mr. Lu was twisted and taken away. Although the two were only a few meters apart, they were separated by more than 10 years. Daughter Dan Dan did not become the leading actress in the end. She later did not dance again, and became a female worker in the woolen factory. 3 years later, the Cultural Revolution ended, and Mr. Lu, who had returned home, was looking forward to meeting his family, but everything has changed long ago. He took his luggage and happily went upstairs to look for his wife, whom he had not seen for years. The door was wide open, and no one was in the house, but there were stickers in all corners of the house saying, "Don't close the door, and remember to turn off the lights." Not long after, his wife, Won Yu, came back, and they both greeted each other happily, but as if they were strangers. His wife even politely poured water for Mr. Lu. She was going to buy vegetables and cook, but suddenly thought that the man in the house was Master Fang of the Revolutionary Committee, the same Master Fang who had bullied her. She turned around and went into the house and drove the man out. Mr. Lu was puzzled and asked his daughter Dan Dan, and learned that is his wife now suffering from amnesia. The district director proves to the wife again and again that this is her husband, Mr. Lu, and he has been acquitted, but the wife still did not believe it. In desperation, Mr. Lu stayed in a kiosk where he could see home at a glance. The next morning, his wife went out to the train station to pick up Mr. Lu. Mr. Lu followed her along. Mr. Lu peeked at his wife waiting for him. He felt very bad. He thought of a way to return on the 5th, as written on the letter he sent to his wife before. and he decided that on the 5th he would pretend to return from the train station to jog her memory of himself, and he deliberately put on the coat of his youth, so that maybe she would recognize him. On the 5th, his wife stood at the entrance of the train station, with a sign waiting for him. Mr. Liu also came out of the train station, but he stood in front of her. She still did not know him. Facing his wife's empty eyes, cannot hide the disappointed expression, but also can only pass by her. This may be the world's farthest distance. The doctor told Mr. Liu that maybe music, letters, and photos could jog her memory, and his daughter brought home photos of Mr. Liu that were cut out by Dan Dan. He found a group photo at an old school friend, but his wife could not recognize the man in the photo, and the man in front of her is the same person. Mr. Liu fixed the piano at home and played the piano song they were familiar with, hoping to awaken his wife's memory. The wife followed the sound to home, as if she recognized Mr. Liu, and Mr. Liu also cried with joy, and the two embraced with tears. But the next moment, the wife's eyes were hollow again. Frustrated, Mr. Liu had to find another way. Mr. Liu found the letters he had written to his wife, Won Yu, hoping to exchange them for his wife's memory. In this way, Mr. Liu takes the role of a letter reader, reading his letters one by one. Being with your lover in another capacity, even if your wife doesn't know you now, you are content to be with her all the time. Afterwards, Mr. Liu read through his letters, was able to bridge the gap between mother and daughter, was able to let Dan Dan stay at home to take care of his wife in her old age. After getting acquainted with Won Yu as a letter reader, the family has a happy warmth again. On the night when he brings Dan Dan dinner again, Mr. Liu tries to add a quilt to his wife's bed, but his wife wakes up and mistakes Mr. Liu for Master Fang. He used to bully her. Mr. Liu asked Dan Dan what was going on, and after he understood, he came to Master Fang's place to look for him and tried to teach him a lesson, but he learned from his wife that Master Feng had been imprisoned. Upon his return, he remained silently with his beloved wife. On the evening of the New Year's Eve, accompanied by her daughter, a bowl of dumplings was brought to Mr. Liu, and the constant companionship seemed to have touched his wife. Time flies, and many years later, it was the 5th of the month again, and once again Mr. Liu accompanied his wife, Won Yu, to the station to pick up that husband, Mr. Liu, who had been waiting so hard for his wife in his heart to come home. Mr. Liu pulled his wife to the station to wait. The wind and snow, the two hold each other, the film ends. Maybe one day she will remember Mr. Liu, maybe she will never again. He can only be a neighbor, or a driver there. He can be by her side, can take care of her, can warm her, can see her joy and sorrow, stay with her. Enough company is the longest love confession. Although the whole film is tragic, but there is no lack of warm moments. In terms of the love expressed in the film, companionship is the longest confession. The film is also a true replay of the fear and helplessness of people during the 10-year catastrophe in China, and the humility of individuals under the crazy power system, the trampling of human rights, and the unbearable human nature. Millions of such tragedies have really happened in China. History can be covered up and forgotten. I hope that the experience of that generation will not be repeated. Well, that's it for today's commentary. Please subscribe, click the like button and share this video. Movie Uncover. See you next time.